All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I am sitting here. It's the Black on Black show. We're here with Mayor Joe Hogsett. It's around 2 p.m. on a beautiful day here in Indianapolis, and we've reached almost 100 days. So how do we feel? What do you feel? You got 100 days, almost 100 days under your belt. So tell me, what do you feel you've accomplished at this point?
Well, several things. I think everyone understands that we do have a public safety crisis in Indianapolis. The level of gun violence continues. Just this morning, when I was coming into the office, I'm given a daily report on what has occurred in the previous 24 hours. Just this morning, over the last 24 to 36 hours, we had 4 more aggravated assaults, and then 2 more appear to be homicides, criminal homicides. So that has been the primary focus. Obviously, IMPD and IFD and all of the public safety components have been working with the Office of the Mayor to put together a 100-day plan. Last week, as you know, we did announce that within a couple of weeks we should be able to put more police officers into our neighborhoods so that we can return to a beat-oriented approach to community-based policing rather than what IMPD currently does, and that is it operates in zones, which I guess if you're understaffed is really the only way that you can cover large areas. But we want to get back to a point where neighborhoods are the focus of IMPD's attention, in the sense of everyone in the neighborhood getting to know their officer, every officer getting to know their beat, and that doesn't mean they're going to be walking around the entire shift,
right?
But they're going to be able to spend time and get to know people in the neighborhoods. Now, the biggest benefit and the reason why that's important from my perspective is we need to rebuild trust in so many different neighborhoods of our city toward law enforcement. And I do think that if you have officers getting out of cars, walking the neighborhoods, talking to merchants, talking to retail establishments, sitting in coffee shops, going into the barber shops, just communicating.
Absolutely.
I think it will have a very positive effect on rebuilding and reestablishing the community police relationship, which, look, you don't need to look further than Ferguson and Baltimore and Chicago to know that we live on very precarious ground in the country today.
Sure.
And many neighborhoods in Indianapolis feel more that they are being policed than they are being protected and served.
Absolutely.
So we need to reestablish that trust, and hopefully this 100-day plan that we've embarked on, the challenges aren't going to be, solved in 100 days, but you can lay the groundwork for what will come thereafter.
Yeah, I had Chief Troy Riggs on the show last week, so shout out Chief Troy Riggs. And he said that the police officers have been running with an 11-mile radius, which will never give you an opportunity to truly police the people from a perspective of saying we meet, we greet, we talk, we know each other. That embrace part did leave the police department, and I think that one of the things that has been a huge challenge is people talking about the homicides that have been going on. I think that by allowing the officers to have an intimate relationship with the people, that piece of talking won't look so obvious. Tell me, how do you feel about that piece being like the intricate piece of decreasing that thing of not talking in the community?
Yeah, that's an age-old problem, where people in the community, frankly, and understandably, are concerned about revenge, retaliation, and if they come forward and are honest about evidence that they may have witnessed or that they may possess to help law enforcement resolve some of these unsolved aggravated assaults or homicides, I think that that's very important. Now, again, it's not going to be done overnight, but I do think that when IMPD operates in this zone coverage, at least in the areas of our city that are denser or more dense, I should say, in population, too often, a police officer, as soon as they complete a run, gets back into their car and
Boom.
bam, they have another call that they have to respond to.
Right.
So there's very little proactivity. It's all reactive.
Sure.
And so the point being that when an officer shows up at the scene of some mischief or mayhem that has taken place or is occurring, the people don't know who that officer is. They don't know anything about that officer. Mm-hmm. Frankly, the officer doesn't know who those people
Correct.
are, you know, in whatever neighborhood you're talking about. So I do think that it will hopefully serve several purposes. First, it will reestablish a relationship and hopefully engender trust between police and the community. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I hope, not in every case, but in many cases, will encourage people to come forward and to provide information, because ultimately what our interests are as a community is safe streets and peaceful neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to have a peaceful neighborhood if you've got people operating in that neighborhood outside the bounds of the law, and no one in that neighborhood who is assisting in figuring out how to resolve the situation.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if they're in a standoff now, and we need to break that deadlock.
I agree. So the murder rate, I mean, it's been crazy. It looks like it's pretty aggressive now. What other plans do you have to combat that? Because I think that to me, there's another piece of it, and that's the economic piece of it. Because when we look at a lot of other metropolitan, Chicago, New York, and we see the crime that's happening there, a lot of it stemmed because of unemployment. I know we see the number that says unemployment is going down, but that's kind of based on the claim in a sense. How do we combat this thing by saying people are actually having jobs to provide a living for their families? Because one thing, if I give 40 hours and I still can't feed the people in my household, I'm probably more likely to do something to feed the people in my household. How do we get around that?
You're spot on. The statistics as relate to unemployment are misleading. I would suggest to all of those who are listening that the more relevant statistic is, if you can quantify it, underemployment.
I agree.
People are not unemployed. I mean, the statistics are what the statistics are.
Right.
There are people that have jobs, but you hit the nail on the head. What kind of jobs are those, and what are they paying?
Right.
And what we found after the country's financial meltdown in 2008 was this period of significant transformation. A lot of people were unemployed, who now, here some 7-8 years later, they've worked their way back into the workforce, but they're only being paid 50% of what they were making prior to the financial meltdown.
Right.
And I think your point is good. What benefit is having a job if at the end of the day you work a 40-hour work week, and at the end of the day you can't provide for the education for your kids, housing for your family, a retirement for yourself?
Right.
All the basics of what we call the American dream. So, in specific answer to your question, what are we doing? Well, I think that the investments that the city can make and need to engage in have to be made at the earliest possible time in our children's lives. And that is why, for example, you'll hear me talk a lot about the state stepping up and fully funding comprehensive universal pre-K for all of our kids, ages 3, 4, 5. You'll hear me talk about, even though I don't have direct responsibility over public education, quality K through 12 education for our kids. You'll hear me talk, and will particularly over these next few weeks, about a summer jobs program for 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old youth who are at risk.
Yes.
Because those types of investments at the front end may very well help keep our kids out of the criminal justice system altogether. In the past, and I know I'm going on too long.
Oh, no, you're fine.
In the past, I will tell you, as a former federal prosecutor, as a former United States attorney, I saw on my desk the files of 22, 23, 24, 25-year-old, predominantly male, predominantly black, individuals who, frankly, their criminal rap sheets, by the time they were in their early 20s, were already so long and so well established that their ability to return to a life of productive and civic-oriented, opportunity is almost absent. So my point is, if we can invest in our kids at those stages of their lives that help them make good choices to stay in school, to complete their high school degree, and to make good decisions, then ultimately, hopefully, you can keep them out of the criminal justice system altogether, rather than trying to figure out, okay, they've made some mistakes, and how do we pull them away from bad decisions and bad choices? And it's just a different way of looking at the same problem.
I was looking at, you brought in Deputy Mayor Hampton. We believe it's a great choice. And we look and we say, because I believe that he has done, he's done some great work in the community. I have to say that. But when we look at the pastors, and church organizations, and we try to get them involved in the things that are going on in our communities, I think that for me, one of the biggest disconnects is that the community still believes in the church. How do we combat that? Because I think that one of the biggest, to me, that's a large disconnect now. The church used to be such a pillar in the African American and Black community. But that shift, there has been such a shift change because, and I'll just be quite frank, because most people in the neighborhoods are seeing church leaders as people who are also getting rich off the neighborhoods. So how do we go about building that? I know that Dr. Hampton is really doing some work out there. How do we bridge the gap of that relationship? Because I believe if we can get back to dealing with the church and get back to talking with the churches, that could be another safe haven or a place that people will go and feel free to talk.
Well, I think that is an important question, and we certainly stand ready to work with faith-based communities throughout Indianapolis, because, and particularly in the African American community, the church has always been probably the most prominent institution of Black leadership and Black involvement. Sure. So, to say that we, and I understand that there are perceptions about some of the pastors who, like every human being, may have their own agendas that they're pursuing. I hope that that's not universal. I hope that more pastors are like David Hampton, who I believe, as you know, Pastor Hampton has not spared the rod in the past as it relates to issues like community police relationships. I mean, David Hampton has been one of the most outspoken critics of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department in the community. So my suggestion would be that we continue to work with faith-based groups, but also, and I've tried to be a very real presence in those neighborhoods in our community that, frankly, experience a disproportionately high degree of gun-related violence, whether it's in white, impoverished neighborhoods, whether it's in predominantly African-American or Latino neighborhoods. I think it's important that the mayor be present and to create relationships, not only with the pastors, but with community and civic leaders, neighborhood organizations, to make sure that they understand that the administration is trying to be as responsive to all of the needs, and not just through certain emissaries. In the past, perhaps it was appropriate to deal almost exclusively with the clergy. because of the role the clergy has traditionally played in the African American community. To the extent that those roles are now evolving and changing, we must ourselves change.
Absolutely. So what other groups outside that are you guys targeting, other groups that you may say, okay, we can work with this group or that group? Because I think the language is so different now. You know, when I look, I have two teenagers. So when I look and I say the language is so different, you know, because when I look and I'm like, okay, these guys are coming out and they're talking to the community, it's almost like they don't understand the language. Mm-hmm. So how do we get that? How do we say, okay, let's get some people out here? Maybe it's a younger group of people. Maybe it's some people who are, you know, tweeners. Mm-hmm. And we say, okay, we need these people because the language barrier, I think, is humongous in the community.
Let me give you a good example of what you're talking about. I was meeting during the course of the most recent campaign for mayor with several leaders of the tech community. Mm-hmm. And I found the conversation to be very informative. But perhaps the most informative aspect of it was they recommended to me, they said, if you happen to get elected mayor, do yourself a big favor and hire a couple of people in positions of responsibility that would be cabinet level who are under the age of 30.
Yeah. Okay.
And they said, we're not going to tell you who to hire. Mm-hmm. We're not going to tell you what to hire them for. Their point simply was, have people under the age of 30 in the room with you. It's not only important in their perspective to be diverse from a racial or a gender perspective. They were saying be diverse from a chronological or age-oriented perspective. Sure. And their point, obviously, was you don't think like they do. Right. And they don't think like you do.
Correct.
But you two need to be hearing each other when decisions are, you're not always going to agree with them. Mm-hmm. They are going to be able to provide you with a perspective, though, that will better inform the ultimate decisions that you've made. So that is why we made very purposefully and put together a leadership team in the mayor's office that is simply, in my opinion, the most diverse leadership team in our city's history. Awesome. It is diverse from racial and ethnic perspectives. It is diverse from gender perspectives. And it is clearly diverse from chronological perspectives. Chronological meaning age. We've got I think, a healthy mix of, kind of white hairs like me who have been around a while. But then a good example is our communications director, Taylor Schaefer, who is under the age of 30 and has never worked in government in her life.
Awesome.
But it's that combination that I think ultimately helps us make better, thoughtful decisions.
Awesome. I love it. That's one of the best answers I could ever ask for. So moving forward, I know of groups attempting to purchase abandoned houses and lots. They've been told that it could take up to 6 months to acquire property owned by the city. Is this true? If so, why?
Well, it is true, unfortunately, that under the current system, it is very. Look, you talk about abandoned homes, and people say, well, it's too expensive to tear down homes that are beyond repair. And that is true, but not for the reasons that people believe it, okay. Right? Okay? It is true that it's too expensive in many instances to rid our neighborhoods of houses that have become literally risky, mm-hmm. safety-wise, or dilapidated, but not because of the costs of tearing the house down.
Okay.
The actual costs of raising a house are predictably and discernibly manageable. I mean, you can have a demolition crew come in and take down a house in a day or two. That's not the cost that they're talking about. The cost that they're talking about goes to your question, and that is the legal process right. of obtaining the title free and clear from the city's perspective. And you do have, in Indianapolis today, a lot of homes owned by absentee landlord, people who don't live in Indianapolis, don't even live in Indiana,
Right.
live in California, live in Washington, live in Oregon, live in other places, and who are simply making investments. They have no desire to improve the quality of that home. They're just, for tax-related reasons, investing in as many properties as they can. And then once they've reached their benefit, their highest benefit in terms of their investment for tax reasons, they just let the home fall into a state of disrepair.
Right.
So the legal process now. So the question is, what do you do about that? Well, we will announce within fairly short order, I think, a comprehensive strategy toward identifying those abandoned homes. It's also important to say, just because a home is abandoned does not mean that it ought to be scrapped.
Right.
There are many homes that I would like to offer to maybe young teachers or younger families that you offer that the home to them for less than what it may be worth, and in return, for example, in the educational arena, that a young teacher comes in, buys a home for less than fair market value,
Sure.
and in return, and they agree that improving the home is going to be on their dime, but at least they don't have a mortgage payment, right?
Not bad.
So they're able to put what would otherwise go to a mortgage payment into rehabbing that home, and in return, they agree to teach in IPS for 3 or 4 years.
Beautiful.
And then at the end of 3 or 4 years, they may decide, okay, well, we'll flip the home, make some money out of it. Great. I hope that they would stay at IPS and teach, but even if they chose not to, we will have been given the benefit of 2 things. One, the benefit of their professional expertise in teaching in the Indianapolis public school system, and a house that's back on the property tax rolls.
Right.
So the city, it's almost a win-win situation. Now, for those homes that are just completely in a state of total disrepair, then it seems to me we're going to have to, as I said, announce a comprehensive effort. Not particularly similar to, but not dissimilar to what was done up at Fall Creek Place in the Peterson administration. When you go up there today, that's a transformed neighborhood. Now, you've got a lot of empty lots up there that are ripe for development, but at least the lots are empty. They're not run-down homes that roofs are caving in.
Right.
There are so many people that I talked to during the course of this campaign in neighborhoods throughout our city who told me, I maintain the house next to mine
Absolutely.
because I don't want it falling in and harming my property.
Exactly.
Or I maintain an abandoned home next to mine because I don't want a fire to get started.
Right.
Or I try to maintain a home next to mine because I don't want drug dealers moving in
the
there.
crack house. Yeah.
So,
I got you. You said something about, I know you don't directly deal with IPS, but from what we see, I mean, it's just been on and on and on and on. What is it that we can do, or what is it that, as citizens, because I know a lot is going on, and a lot of hurting people and a lot of disappointed people in the public school system. And I think for Indianapolis to be more competitive, education has to be top notch. What can we do about IPS?
well, and frankly, the conversation should not just focus on IPS.
Okay.
It needs to focus on every school corporation in Marion County. And the reason for that is it used to be that the suburbs of our city were the townships.
Okay.
That's not true anymore. Indianapolis's suburbs, in reality, are the contiguous counties. And the reason I say that is that, and don't get me wrong, IPS is in desperate need of all of our attention.
Sure.
But the truth is also that in Wayne, in Pike, in Warren, in Washington, the percentage of students in the township schools that are now eligible for free or reduced student lunch or breakfasts, or the number of households in those townships that exist at or below federal poverty line. Whereas 25 years ago, it may be 15 to 20% of the students would fall into that category in the townships. Today, in the township schools, clearly 60 to 70% of the kids are coming to school and eligible for free or reduced lunch or breakfast.
It's a lot.
And at IPS has largely gone to a universal breakfast and lunch for all of its students.
Wow.
So, first of all, it's not just IPS. We need to be thinking about public education in every township school as well. But IPS clearly needs the bulk of our attention because it has endured these systemic challenges longer than any other school corporation has. And so you ask, what's the answer? Well, I work very closely with Dr. Farabee and the administration of IPS. I do think that there's a glimmer of hope in many of the things that Dr. Farabee and the school board is attempting to bring to IPS. But I would suggest two things. Number one, the mayor of the city of Indianapolis needs to be an outspoken advocate for adequate student funding for every child, whether it's in IPS or any educational institution in K through 12 educational institution in our county. So funding for education is critical. Now that's a determination made by the Indiana General Assembly, but that doesn't mean the mayor of the city of Indianapolis shouldn't be in the halls of the General Assembly promoting adequate funding. But let me just add one additional thing. For all of your listeners out there who are saying, yeah, but what can I do?
Right.
What can I do as an individual? And I have to say, be a mentor. Take one child. Take one child under your wing and stay and not make it a one-time deal for a school year, but determine what 5-year-old, kindergartner, or first grader needs an adult role model in their life beyond parents, beyond grandparents, beyond relatives, but what one child could be well served by an adult role model who would provide opportunities that that child would not otherwise have, and to provide a good perspective whenever that child is faced with tough decisions they inevitably will be faced with as they grow. And so I know that one child at a time will take a while, but if everyone, and maybe this is ultimately the mayor's responsibility, if we can somehow rally the community to helping in their own individual way a child or two, and I think that could make a profound difference. It really could. There have been too many instances where kids who are now teenagers, who are now in vocational or technical training, who are pursuing certifications, who are pursuing licensures, who are in college, have told me, but for, this man or this woman taking me into their under their wing and into their homes and providing me with a positive role model, I probably wouldn't be in school today. I'd probably be out on the streets.
Awesome. So I know you got to get out of here, Mayor, but I have two. One thing we do at Black on Black after every show, everyone gives 2 dedications of things they're going to do moving forward once they leave the show that will help improve the African American community. Can you give us 2 things that you believe you can do moving forward to help improvement in our communities?
Yeah, I've talked about one because it's just a passion of mine. We are going to try to begin by the summer of 2016, which is only 2 months away now, 3 months away, we're going to try to provide 1,000 kids in our community with summer job opportunities. And that's important for a wide variety of different reasons, not the least of which, as a sage observer once told me, in the summer when kids got nothing to do, they rarely do nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there is so much truth to that. So if it's 1,000 kids this summer, maybe by the summer of 2017, we'll be able to employ 2,000 kids. Maybe by 2018, it'll be 3,000 or 4,000 kids. So that's number one, I think, a very important aspect. The other thing that I would commit to do as mayor, and have already really begun, even in these first 3 months, is to be a very real presence in the community, whether it be at community events, whether it be in the barbershops and the beauty shops, whether it be in our churches, not just before the election, when you're asking people for their support. I have been, since taking office, have been in so many places in the African American community where people will look at me like I'm an alien. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they do so is they say, "What are you doing here? The election is over."
Right.
People like you only come to our community before the election.
That's true.
What are you doing here after the election? So my commitment, my second commitment, and I think it's equally as important as giving good job opportunities, meaningful summer job opportunities for our kids, is to simply be the kind of mayor that gets out in the community so that people can see you, get to know you better on a personal level, not just from TV, not just from newspaper accounts, but can ask you questions, can, just like you've done, challenge some assumptions, and feel as if they may not always agree with you, and I don't expect to be supported by every single person in our community, but at least I want the opportunity to hear what's on their mind, and I think that that's important that every mayor do. You know, in my lifetime, and I'm dating myself with your listening audience, but in my lifetime, Mayor Hudnut probably did that. Of all the great mayors we've had, Mayor Hudnut probably did that better than any mayor I know, with all due respect to everybody who served in this office. And it's that kind of Hudnut accessibility, that Hudnut visibility in the community that I want to emulate as mayor.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say thank you for taking some time out to talk with us at Black on Black. Hopefully, we can definitely, get back together, do some work together, man. Because I definitely appreciate the time that you've taken, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future here in Indianapolis. So,
thanks for having me, and I look forward to coming back.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
All right.